What's going on, guys? My name is Hyena, and I'm going to be telling you about different college professors and different students you might run into during your career. Obviously, your mileage may vary, but the first student we're going to get into is the asshole. And you might be saying to yourself, that sounds very close to another word that you can't say on YouTube without risking demonetization. And you would be correct. This student primarily asks questions at inopportune times, questions that don't pan out, or questions that don't help anybody. An example would be, in a Calc 1 class, they ask, are black holes really infinitely dense? And while that's an interesting question, it's not exactly in the scope of the material, and we'd all like to move on. The next student we're going to talk about is called the Ghost, and judging by the name, you probably know where this is going. They're students that you know you've seen, and your friends in class have seen, but like real ghosts, there's no real evidence that they exist. And you might ask yourself, why would you sign up to college only to not go to class? Well, ghosts have a particular strategy. What they're doing is they're coming in on critical days, like exam days, on classes where exams are weighed heavily, and they're passing the class that way, especially if attendance isn't mandatory. And you might ask yourself, what are they doing if they're not in class and they have to live on campus? And the answer is, it's anyone's guess. They could be working, jacking off, playing video games. Who knows? Next we have the dog, or as you might know it, the teacher's pet. And you think people would grow out of this by the time they get into college, but this popular high school and middle school aesthetic prevails into higher education. They're students that typically sit closer to the front. They ask a lot of personal questions to the professor that kind of seem unsettling if you're just on a professional basis. Like, oh, how is your kids? Did you see them this weekend? How is your divorce? And it's kind of... I mean, do you really get brownie points for that? That seems like the kind of thing that would just make me upset as an instructor when I'm trying to get things going.
The next group of students I'm going to be talking about are the dropouts, and this doesn't mean they've dropped out of college completely. This means that they've dropped a course. And if you're new to college, it's your first semester, you might notice that you start a class with 17 people, which is a fairly standard amount. But then, by the end of the semester, you notice there's only about 7 of the 17 left. And that's because people have dropped the course for various reasons, including being moved up to a better course that was on their wait list, or maybe they just decided they didn't like that particular instructor, or maybe they just dropped out of college. I don't know. You don't ever see these people again, so you can never really be sure.
The next group we're going to talk about is somebody that might be near and dear to you. You might even be one yourself, the gamer. And what I mean by gamer is that they're similar to ghosts because they're in class corporeally, but they're not there participating in the course. They really may as well not be there. And I've seen people play everything from RuneScape, Minecraft, Team Fortress. The list really just goes on and on. There was a girl that played solitaire through my entire creative writing class every single day. And while solitaire isn't really what you think of when you think of gamer, it still served the same effect. An overachiever is similar to a teacher's pet or a dog. They get everything right, they ask a lot of questions, but these questions aren't personal, these are actually useful questions, unlike the asshole. And you may notice that you have about 2 or 3 of these per class, people whose GPAs are typically 3.8 and above. These are easily the most tolerable of all students because they ask genuinely needed questions for clarification, and they usually keep to themselves and don't ask personal questions. Probably the A tier of the college archetypes. The last group of students are what are known as the NPCs. And you might be familiar with this face, but this doesn't exactly do it justice. NPCs mostly come to class, they give what sound like scripted questions and scripted responses, similar to any other NPC. But honestly, What's wrong with that? I mean, you come to class, you ask some questions, you give some responses, you go home. That seems like, other than the overachiever having to deal with, that seems ideal to have in your class. Now, NPC is usually considered a negative term, but truthfully, most people don't want to talk to you and you don't want to talk to most people. Let's be honest with ourselves. So this is probably also an A-tier college archetype. Now we're going to look at professors, and the first professor we're going to look at is the activist archetype of professor. Now, these professors typically like to give extra credit in the form of attending protests, assemblies, starting protests, making banners, making picket signs, things like that. And my college actually had a rule against it, which I am very thankful for. But that doesn't stop them from encouraging students to make YouTube videos, blogs, annoy other students to sign petitions, and this typically comes across as a D tier sort of archetype professor. The only light side is, if you just agree with them, you're going to get a good grade, and sometimes it's just worth it. Other times, it's funny to see him pissed off, so you gotta make the call on that one. Up next we have the soon-to-be retirees. These are professors that are going to be gone in about, say, 3 years max, and they just don't care anymore. They're very simple to get along with, they just want to be done with their job, and I can kinda respect that, because that's how it is with most trades or white-collar work or anything. The goal is to ultimately not be there when you're old. So, these guys, they'll let you slide as long as you don't make them upset. On the plus side, if you're into books, they typically give away their entire libraries of their office when they leave, so be on the lookout for that. The next type of professor we're going to talk about is the hard ass. Now, they're going to assign somewhere between 100 to 1,000 assignments, but the cool thing is, if you do all of them, you typically get respect from the professor, and therefore you will get a better grade because they do see that you're trying. On the flip side, you can use Canvas or Blackboard or some other thing that colleges use to calculate your grade and see just how many assignments you can afford to get a 0 on and just not do, and still not drift into that D territory. Now, that being said, keep in mind that your GPA doesn't really matter after college unless you intend on doing more college, like getting a master's or a PhD. So if you're cool with getting a 71, that's fine. You can miss like 30 assignments. But if you want to go for that master's degree, you might want to go ahead and do all the assignments. And yeah, it kind of busts your balls, but at the same time, the respect from the teacher is going to go a long way, and they might even be willing to write you a letter of recommendation for when you go to get that master's degree. The next type of professor we're going to be talking about is the one-hit wonder. Now, what do I mean by one-hit wonder? Well, that just means they have one assignment for the entire semester, and that can be as simple as a writing assignment on a thick book that's only about 10 pages long, or it can be something as complicated as a 25-step assignment that's technically one assignment, but it has multiple parts. That's the most annoying. Now, these professors I would honestly avoid, because you never know what you're going to get. If you get the writing assignment, that's good, because that's easy. If you get the multi-step bullshit, you gotta be there every day, and you have to participate, and you have to present in class at the end of it, I would avoid it. Make use of the, what's that website where you can rate my professor? Look on Rate My Professor to see how these particular professors are doing their assignments. Up next, we have what's known as a Teamwork Willy, because dickhead isn't exactly polite. Now, what do these particular professors do? They focus on group projects. Now, the usual excuse is, oh, well, you're going to have to learn how to work with people in the real world, and that's true, but the problem is in the real world, people let you down as well. And that's exactly what happens with group projects. You typically have a group of 5, and maybe 2 people actually do any real work. But the good thing is, instead of having just one assignment or 1,000 assignments, you typically only have about 3 or 4. Now, if you really don't like group projects like me, I would suggest again using Rate My Professor to see what assignments this professor likes to assign. I avoid group projects at all costs, and I know a lot of other people do too. Lastly, we're going to look at the normie professor type, and this is about 75% of all professors that you're going to encounter in your college career, so I hope you like mind-numbingly boring lectures. These normie professors aren't really known for anything spectacular, and they're not known for having a lot of pizzazz. They mostly just show up, clock in, go to work, go home. And I mean, I can respect that. That's what most people do, and it's what you're expected to do in society. But at the same time, I would rather really do anything else than go to one of their lectures. So I would honestly buckle in, because you can autopilot through most of the lectures of normie professors. I'd like to thank you for watching till the end of the video. If you liked it, leave a like, and if you want to see more, subscribe. Until then, I will be hanging out in the void. I plan to upload on this channel about once a week, and I plan to have a history channel where I upload about every 2 weeks. So stay tuned for that, and until then, I guess I'll see you later.